Gina, thanks so much for joining the podcast. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, tell us a little bit about PathWell, a company you founded and are CEO of. And yeah, would love to hear a bit about what you do and why you started it.
Sure. So PathWell is what I call a 360 mental wellness clinic in downtown Toronto. We're located in the financial district. And I call it 360 because we sort of think about mental wellness through a 360 lens, and therefore the help and services that we provide also fit that lens. So, for example, we have psychotherapists here and clinical psychologists who provide therapy, clinical psychologists who do sort of clinical assessments. But in addition to mental health clinicians, we also have dietitians. We have a psychiatrist for our clients who need some medication support. We have a sleep specialist. We have executive coaches. We have a breathwork coach. I think I mentioned dietitian. We have a personal trainer. We have a massage therapist. And I'm always adding to that as well. So again, think about mental wellness and sort of conceptualizing it and treating it through that 360 lens. With the bench of clinicians that I have, we can see everybody from ages 5 and up. There is certainly a skew towards treating executives and sort of leaders. I think just by virtue of sort of the world I come from, which is executive health, but also where we're located in the financial district in downtown Toronto. But by extension, then we also help and provide services to the loved ones of the leaders and employees that we see. So, for example, we treat their children. We do couples counseling if they need couples counseling. We can see their families. So we have family counselors here. So it's providing 360 support primarily to leaders, but also to their loved ones as well.
What is unique about an executive versus maybe another individual that you would help, like a CEO or C-suite, CFO level, or senior leaders within organizations? What's unique about them when it comes to mental health?
So, I mean, if you just think about the pressure that they're under, the hours they have to work, right? So the lifestyle, it can be very stressful, and it's almost unnatural, right? To maintain, like to sustain that kind of pressure, those work hours. It's a bit different, right? In terms of also the responsibility that they bear. Because of that responsibility, they're often worrying about their performance, wondering, am I good enough? Am I doing enough? Right? They have this sort of added concern around how other people are judging them that we don't tend to see in the general population.
So, Gina, we were talking a bit about imposter syndrome, and you shared that is more prevalent the higher up people get in their careers, which seems a little bit counterintuitive. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, it does seem counterintuitive, right? It does. It feels like, well, you've the more success you have, then you should be more confident. You should be able to say, well, very experienced. I know what I'm doing, but that's not actually the case. So what research has found consistently over time is that, yes, the higher up someone climbs up their career ladder, the more and more susceptible they're going to be to experiencing the imposter syndrome. So, the question then becomes, well, why is that? And why that is the higher up someone climbs the ladder, they have sort of more responsibility, right, in their role. They're often more responsible, for more and more people. They become more sort of visible, right, to others. They're the face of the organization. They're often making more money as a result of the added responsibilities. So there is this idea of, well, there's so much more to lose now. I stand so much more to lose, and then they start to question. Am I actually the best person for this role? Do I deserve to be here? Do I know what I'm doing? Right. And then that they start to second guess their competencies, despite right the evidence showing that yes, of course, that's why you got to where you are. They're extremely smart, talented, competent people, but the more they think they stand to lose, the more they question whether or not they are the right person to actually be in that role.
Interesting. And I personally feel better knowing other people have that. So I think that's helpful over time when you realize you're not the only one. And you had said something about, telling your clients, they're not that special. uh, would you really say that? Would you really tell them that?
I would, and I do. I do. And I say that with great love and care. But I say, this is where I love, and I always preface like, this is where, and one of the only times where I will say to you, and I love to say to you, guess what, David? You're not that special. Because I've been doing this for a long time. And I promise you, virtually every leader that has stood in front of me or sat in front of me in my office has said the same thing, right? They've second guessed themselves in some capacity. They worry about what other people are thinking of them, right? The thoughts are actually the same across virtually all of the leaders that I've worked with. So it's very, very common. And I also frame it like this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's only an unhelpful thing when it starts to get in the way of performance or behaviors. But questioning yourself, checking in with you, asking yourself, well, hold on, like, am I the best person? Like having that humility, I think is so important as a leader. Like I worry more about the leaders who say, I'm great. I'm great. I'm exactly the person. Of course they should be in this role. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I'm perfect. I don't have to change a thing. I'd be very weary of that person versus a person who's second guesses and has self-awareness and is questioning themselves, right? So I think that sort of humility is a wonderful thing. We just want to make sure, like I said, that that doesn't get in the way of performance, or it doesn't contribute to what I call anxiety behaviors that end up possibly impairing performance as well, right? So things like perfectionistic behaviors that lead to then inefficiencies, spending too much time on something because you're really worried about what people are going to think of whatever your presentation, when you really should be pivoting and focusing your attention on something else, right? So that's just an example. So where the imposter syndrome starts to affect performance or affect somebody's well-being, then we need to intervene.
And you're trying to compensate for it, and then you start to spiral, I guess, into these bad
Yes.
behaviors. This is
Yes,
this is so
100%.
powerful, and I love that you brought up like the public speaking or the presentation side, which most people have a fear of.
Yeah.
I think they're like similar in that, okay, knowing everyone feels that is huge, and that's just how you deal with it. But if
Mhm.
you don't feel it, like you said, for imposter syndrome, if you don't have it, actually that could be worse because then you may not have humility or other
Right.
characteristics. Just like in public speaking, if you don't have a little bit of stress and anxiety, you may not do the things you need to do to deliver with, impact. And
Exactly.
so I think that's a huge framing a benefit, to have that framing. It's interesting. This stuff is just not taught in school, and it's not like intuitive. I used to observe anxiety symptoms of and that it in and of itself would create more. It's like this, and so you just need to like accept it. It's there for some more than others, and just knowing that and just letting it be and then moving towards what you need to do. I just think it's so powerful. So I really think our audience will
Yeah.
appreciate hearing that.
Yeah.
The imposter syndrome. Okay, it's a good thing.
It's a good thing. And I love what you said about anxiety because that's also true. And a little bit of anxiety is also a good thing. We
Yeah.
know this. We know this from, from sports, right? If you don't feel a little bit anxious with any type of performance, you're right. You're not going to do the things that you need to do right? In order to perform well, right? You're not going to like care as much, essentially. So, sometimes public speaking is a great example. So, leaders will say to me, doc, what do I got to do? You're going to teach me how to just go in there and give my presentation and not feel any anxiety. I was like, I'm not going to do that for you because I would be doing you a disservice. What we know about anxiety is that there's a sweet spot. There's a connection between, you can actually see this on a graph. It sort of looks like a upside down U. So there's this sort of inverse relationship between anxiety and performance, such that we know that sort of, imagine an upside down U, the top of the U, that's where you want to be. So that means medium or moderate levels of anxiety are going to give you this is performance, this is anxiety, right? The highest level of performance. So you don't want to feel no anxiety. Low anxiety is correlated with low performance. High anxiety is correlated with low performance. You want that sweet spot. So you want moderate levels of anxiety contribute to the best performance. So even just teaching that to my leaders and say, you don't want to get rid of anxiety. A little bit of anxiety is a good thing. That's what's going to give you your edge. You want to go in there. That's the adrenaline. It's an adrenaline rush, right? So it's reframing performance anxiety is also really helpful for a leader to understand. But it's actually a good thing.
And I've seen something where they talk about like the half-life of that adrenaline spike,
Yep.
which, you know, you got to kind of also wait it out. And so, if it feels overwhelming to people, like, and you just let it be, you will be transitioned to a much calmer state. So it doesn't
Yes.
mean that anxiety is there the entire time.
No.
For some, it could be significant. I sweat even now. Like I just sweat easily. The word anxiety, I could start sweating. And I used to let that bother me, like because it's visible. And I'm like, does this mean I'm not, all these things? What does this person think of me? And some of us have just different physiology. Like, and for me, it's just an easier trigger with a little bit of anxiety. But again, this is so helpful when you just know that, okay, let it pass, let it be.
Yep.
Like just you want to perform, you want to do well, and the key to doing that is to just let it be, right? So
Exactly. Do you know what the difference is physiologically? Okay, so in terms of the body, do you know what the difference is between excitement and anxiety?
no.
There isn't any.
Hmm.
So anxiety, when we feel nervous or scared about something, or when we feel excited about something, that's experienced exactly the same way in the body. There is no difference. So then, well, the next logical follow-up question is, so but there is a difference. What is the difference? So when I feel, how come sometimes I feel scared and you're telling me sometimes I feel excited and that's exactly the same in terms of what happens in the body. So there's gotta be a difference. I'm like, yeah, there actually is a difference. The difference is up here. The difference is the label that you attach to those physiological feelings. So in other words, reframe, if we're talking about public speaking, reframe public speaking away from, I'm so scared to give this presentation, reframe it and flip it to, I'm excited about this presentation. I got my adrenaline is up. This is really important, right? So reframing something as excitement or an adrenaline jolt, guess what? It's going to reduce your fear ratings. Okay, so it's not what's happening in our body in terms of the physical sensations, it's the label in our brain, the cognitive label that we put on those physiological sensations is actually going to determine what emotion you feel.
Wow, that's powerful. I mean, I could just the number of use cases this could apply to where if we perceived our, physiology differently. Um, anyways, we're going down another path. And before I start talking about my childhood and my relationship with
Yeah,
my,
no, no.
my
We won't
dad,
do that.
but yeah, super powerful. And again, it just comes back to show that these things that feel like personal and like I'm talking to a shrink or, I've got like a problem. It's just it's not. It's about like performance and optimization and being at our best. And so again, not to sound cliche, but I truly think that's the case. These seem maybe more obvious, and I guess I can imagine, in your first time speaking to a CEO, like this stuff can bubble up. What about the stuff that doesn't necessarily show up as obviously? What are some of those signs or triggers that are maybe a bit under the surface that folks should be looking out for, or that you look out for?
So, most of the leaders that I work with, I actually sort of wrote an article about this for years ago, in the National Post. And at the time, it was called sort of the worried well, and sort of talked about this population, which was executives, where they would come into my office and I couldn't diagnose them with anything, but they weren't happy. They were stressed. They were telling me they were feeling quite anxious. There's right, but there was nothing diagnosable. So, in other words, I think what you're asking about is, what do I do with the folks when they're experiencing emotions that are just causing them upset and possibly interfering behaviors, but they're just like bubbling under the surface, and we're not at a diagnosable condition yet. So we're not at clinical anxiety, we're not at depression, but we're in the yellow zone, in the cautionary zone, right? And so I have to watch out for that. So what are some of the signs and symptoms of that? So they're in buckets. So there are some, we'll call them, there's an emotional bucket of yellow warning signs. There would be a physical bucket of warning signs, and then there's the behavioral. So starting with the emotions or warning signs, that we're getting into the red danger zone of something diagnosable. Irritability, or specific to work, cynicism, feeling overwhelmed, reacting to things that maybe objectively would seem kind of small, or previously didn't bother a leader and now they do. That's on the sort of the emotional side. On the physical side, one of the early warning signs that we're getting towards the danger zone is sleep. Sleep is such a great barometer, I think, for mental wellness. In fact, I think it's sort of the most important building block for good mental health is sleep. So when I start to notice changes in a leader's sleep patterns, either difficulties falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, early morning awakenings, or waking up and not feeling refreshed. That's usually, or can be, like a warning sign that sort of, again, we're treading into a bit of a danger zone. Tension, muscle tension, headaches, backaches, migraines. Okay, that would be the physical bucket. And then on the behavioral side, not going in to work, right? So we start to see some absenteeism, missing deadlines, or the opposite, sort of some of those perfectionistic behaviors I talked about. So spending too much time on things that don't matter, like stressing over writing emails, right? So sort of perfectionistic behaviors that are very stressful and just not sustainable to maintain. So I look out for all of those.
Like, I guess, how do you address it is a big question. So, but I think about, obviously, talking to someone on the PathWell team, or a mental health professional, that seems obvious. People know that. Okay, go talk to someone. What else should someone be doing or thinking about? And I'd also love to understand the physical component. I see that, I feel that. I think most people do. Like, if I don't have some sort of physical activity,
Yeah.
I can't function.
Yep.
Um, and so, yeah, how important is that? And if somebody comes to you and says, I need help, you see all these warning signs. Are you immediately saying, the physical has to start to get activated as well as the mental?
The physical is huge, right? And there is a huge, right, correlation. They're connected, right? The physical to the mental. I say all the time. So there's no, health without mental health, and there's no mental health without physical health. Like they're just,
Yeah.
two and one of the same. So absolutely. So the physical is so so important, right? To keep that in check, to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Exercise. Oh my gosh, it's one of the most important things that a leader can do for themselves, because it's truly, exercise is medicine. It really is. And there's a lot of research to support this, and what exercise does to the brain can be quite powerful, and in fact more powerful than taking an antidepressant medication or anti-anxiety medication many of the time. So usually the physical, the body is like an alarm system, okay, and it indicates to us when something is not going well, or potentially might not go well in terms of our mental health. Okay, so the early warning signs tend to be physical. Okay, so intervening at that level is so important. I mentioned sleep earlier, that being, to me, the fundamental building block, right, of good mental health. I think exercise is a very close second. That comes next. So if I'm working with a leader and they're telling me, I'm not sleeping well, I'm waking up much earlier in the night because I'm waking up with these worries. Okay, so that to me, I would start by intervening with sleep. So we have a sleep specialist here at PathWell. I will refer to our sleep specialist. We do something called ICBT, which is a protocol-driven 5-session treatment for sleep difficulties. And so I'm going to make sure that that's taken care of, because that's so important. I'm going to then work with the leader to make sure that they carve time out for exercise, right? So we have to take care of the physical, because like I said, that's the barometer for what's coming next if issues in that sphere aren't corrected.
Yeah, back to me and my issues. As I've gotten older, I feel like that's much more impactful on my day and my effectiveness in my day. Sort of like, the clarity and the sort of focus, um, tied to exercise, tied to diet. And then
Yes.
alcohol is a big one.
Yes.
I just feel it so much more than I used to. And
Yes.
it's still hard to get away from in a corporate setting.
Yep.
So yeah, and I also remember at MedCan, I think we had like a survey, when folks came in for their assessments and
Yes.
how many drinks. And I just think one of the categories was like greater than 20. And I'm like, oh, who would, and then I'm like, well, I guess some weeks, if you really think about it and you really are honest about
Yeah.
what the definition of a drink is, some people would be surprised. So yeah, what's your take on alcohol? How much of a culprit is that? And how do you kind of advise people that still want to, live and enjoy a glass of wine with a nice dinner?
Yeah. Uh, it's tricky because the research on this keeps changing as well, right? So now the messaging is sort of any
Abstain.
alcohol. Exactly. Any alcohol is bad. Any alcohol at all. And it's a toxin, and it's, correlated with all these cancers. Like, okay, I share what I know about alcohol. I do recommend, just drink as less as possible. And also being mindful of like what you're drinking and the time, because we know that alcohol, so for example, if you're drinking it too late into the evening and too close to bedtime, then that is going to dysregulate the sleep. And then the number one challenge I get often from my clients is, oh, but doc, it helps me get to sleep. Drinking I was like, you're absolutely right. I will go on record saying that alcohol helps you get to sleep, but there's another side of that coin. It might help you fall asleep, but what we know about alcohol is it dysregulates melatonin production, and it prevents you from getting to deep sleep. So you might fall asleep more easily because you're going to pass out, but you're going to be kept in those lighter stages of sleep. You don't get to stage 5, which is, deeper sleep, 4 and 5, where you're sort of consolidating your memories. You're actually sort of cleaning the junk out of your brain. We know this happens at nighttime, right? You're going to be in those lighter stages of sleep. So if someone calls your name, you're going to wake up. You're not getting restorative sleep. So you're going to be exhausted the next day. It's going to affect your focus. It's going to affect your concentration. And let's remember that alcohol is classified as a depressant because that's what it is. So it's also going to drain your brain of serotonin as it's exiting your system, as it's being metabolized, it's also going to pull some of that serotonin out of your brain. So you can feel you're going to get depressed mood. That's why it's classified as a depressant, right? So then you have a bigger problem than when you started. So very, very cover, especially if I'm working with a leader who, again, is in that sort of yellow zone where they're feeling irritable, they're feeling kind of down, they might be feeling anxious. Alcohol is going to exacerbate all of that in the long run.
Okay, well, you've depressed me now, and
I'm
that's not the
sorry.
answer I was hoping for. So we're going to edit that out fully and just tell people to live life. And no,
Sorry. There's
um,
really nice mocktails on the market now. You can try some of those.
yeah, it's almost like as you get older, you get wiser, but the body also works in a way that it just tells you more. And the body's like, this ain't
Yeah.
cool. And like that's just,
Yes. Yeah.
you can't get away from it. It's like, hey, why do I get sick after, a late night out with my buddies or something? It just you just start to put it together. You're like, stop being an idiot. And so um I was hoping you'd have something else to say, but I know all
Uh,
those like gurus out there,
sorry.
like Andrew Huberman, and
Yes.
they're just like, don't. I'm like, okay,
Just
um,
don't. Right.
just don't. So just a bit of a shift. The word burnout is commonly used, but I wonder if it's really commonly understood, like exactly what it means or what it looks like. CFOs are notorious for working long hours
Mm.
and being too tough to complain about it. And maybe they can sustain it. But between business owners, CFOs, other C-suite executives, professionals, burnout is very common. Tell us a bit about it.
Burnout. Okay. So it's not sustainable. It is not. So burnout means like literally what it sounds like. You have burned out. You're at the end of your rope. You're done. And sometimes, people will say to me, oh, I feel so burned out. And, it came out of the blue. I was doing fine until I wasn't. And, burnout it's not like a light switch. So burnout is a slow burn. Okay. So it happens gradually over time. There are always those, warning signs that we've talked about some of them. Um, but yeah, it just means that you've literally exhausted yourself. Like you are done. At that point, you need to remove yourself from the environment that you're in, and you need to take a break because you need to then now restore yourself, even just back to a neutral state. Okay. So on the mental health spectrum between, incredibly sort of healthy and then what can happen sort of along the lines if things start to change, you don't take care of yourself, like burnout's at the end. There's nowhere else to go. You've hit rock, you're at the bottom. You're at the bottom. So we want to prevent people from getting there as much as possible. We can absolutely intervene, of course, at the burnout stage, but the earlier you intervene, the better. I always tell my clients, like, it's much easier for me to, douse a flame from sort of lighting a match than it is to, douse the flames if the house is on fire. The house is on fire is burnout, right? So I want to, and we can still do that, but I'm going to need heavier artillery here. Like I'm going to need and I'm going to need a team of people to do that too, because I can't do that by myself. So we want to intervene as much as possible, sort of earlier on. The work hours, right, are abnormal, right? Abnormal. We're not designed. The brain, the body, we're not designed to work 12 hours a day, every day for years. That's going to catch up to you. That is just not sustainable. We can do that in very time limited prescripted stints. That's fine, as long as then we give ourselves time to recover from that. But we're not designed to sustain that type of cognitive and physical load indefinitely. We have to think of leadership as akin to like you're running a long distance marathon. And if you sprint out of the gate, you're not going to make it to the end. Slow and steady wins the race. We think of, athletes, rest is built into their training programs. Right? It's so important. And leaders are also performers. Like they are like elite athletes. Like to me, there's no difference. So we have to also build in, right, those rests along the way so that you can sustain the marathon that is leadership. Leaders extremely susceptible to burnout. Women, by the way, more so than men. Um,
Why is
well,
that?
so why is that? The thinking is that women still tend to carry the load of, say, sort of caregiving at home. So when you think of, say female leaders, female executives, they're in that sort of 40, if we look at 40 to 60 window, that's what we call the sandwich generation, right? So this is the generation that is sort of still maybe taking care of kids at home, um, but now also, maybe taking care of aging parents. So they're straddling, right, between, and then they have this big, job to do as well. If they're leaders and they're C-suite, like that, and they're still bearing more of the load of that caregiving responsibility, and that takes a toll.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Um, just a little bit of a gear shift. You know, what is the business case for mental health? What is the conversation that you'd have with CEOs, or CFOs who love things like ROI? What's the business case?
I give them the data. I give them the data because the ROI on investing in mental health programs is very clear. Is clear. So in Canada, so recently a Deloitte actually looked at this and found that for every dollar that was invested in mental health programs, the ROI was $2.18. That's what you get back. I don't know about you, but those are pretty good returns to me. Like if someone told you, I have this stock, David, invest $1, you're gonna get 2.18 back. I'm all in. I'm all in, right? Similar studies were found in the US as well. In the US, they looked at savings in terms of absenteeism, productivity, and sort of decreases in disability. So when clients or employees sort of take disability, right? So costs in disabilities. And they found that for every 100 US dollars that were invested in mental health programs, organizations found a savings of 190 US. Okay, so similar data. We're looking at like doubling. Okay, so the ROI is double. For every dollar you invest, you're going to get like at least sort of two back. So I don't know about you, but that is a very clear business case for me, right? To share with a leader to say, like, listen, you will get returns aside from it being the right thing to do, right? And caring about employees, aside from it being the right thing to do in terms of, you need to take care of yourself before you can help others. It's that oxygen mask. Okay, even if you don't believe me, sort of put that aside. Let's look at the ROI. Let's look at the data. And it just makes good business sense to invest in mental wellness.
Yeah, and I just to add to that, I think, excuse me, presenteeism is really hard to measure and probably not even showing up in a lot of the numbers. And we just all have seen it. And we've maybe been there in our careers
Yeah.
where you're just not at your best and you're just like, get me through the day and you're kind of checked out. So that's not showing up as an absentee, or you may not be having disability costs show up, but there's a real, and I think you maybe when you speak to productivity, that's what you're
Yeah,
getting at.
exactly.
Um, and then there's the cultural side, which is, um, I think, important because, it's not just to say, hey, look, we're great, come work for us because we've got these great sort of mental health benefits and we're, really care about you. I mean, that is a good thing, but also an environment where people feel comfortable to, raise their hand and say they need help. Um, and I guess that's evolved quite, a bit in the world of business. I guess I would love to hear on that note, what do you suggest to CEOs and executives, um, or just people leaders, when they think there's a problem, what steps should they take? And what I mean by a problem with a fellow colleague, employee, someone on the team, um, how do they how do they help that person help themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I work with organizations, and sometimes they'll ask me to sort of come in and sort of consult if they have, an executive or even an employee who's having an issue and they don't know what to do. It always amazes me, like how we think that, okay, so I'll use a real life example. So I once worked with a law firm, and they were very concerned about one of their partners who they thought was depressed and possibly drinking too much, right?
What are their
And
names? Just kidding. Just kidding. You said real example. No,
don't
I'm
you
just kidding.
dare.
I'm just kidding.
Um, a big law firm. So it's anonymous, a big law
Okay.
firm.
Okay.
So I went in there, and they, essentially they wanted to know, like, what do we do about this situation? How do we, what do we say? What do we say? How do we, and it amazed me, like there's sometimes just fear about just asking people, hey, Dave, how are you doing? I noticed that, you missed this deadline. And like, we're concerned. You don't seem like yourself. Like, just again, like the human piece of just asking, right, someone in your organization how you're doing. And then, they're like, what do we do? Do we write it down? Do we, lawyers, what do we do? Do we do loop in HR? I'm like, okay, that fine can come later and we can talk about sort of what that process looks like. But just start with, how are you? Let's just be humans, right? Um, don't be afraid to be, and if you're wrong, great. I would rather that, you ask someone in your organization, if you're concerned about that, ask them how they're doing. If you're wrong, then you're wrong. Okay, then, I'd rather you sort of do that rather than not do it at all because of fear or worrying about saying the wrong thing. And then you might be missing, right? That your employee or someone in your organization is not doing well. So just start by just asking people how they're doing. And that is the type of workplace environment that we all should be striving to cultivate, right? So, if you've heard the word like psychological safety in the workplace, that's what that refers to, right? So it's cultivating, and as a leader, that's the leader's responsibility, is to cultivate a workplace environment where people feel psychologically safe to share how they're feeling without negative repercussions, right? To foster an environment where that type of conversation is okay. But if the leader doesn't model that themselves, then that's never going to happen, right? So absolutely, if you think something is going on with an employee or with, a colleague, just ask them. Just ask them how they're doing. Are you okay? I've noticed X. You can point out what you've noticed in terms of changes in their behavior. And just like, I'm concerned. Is everything okay? I might be wrong. Like you could say, like, I might be off, but this is just something that I've noticed. And I just want to check in with you just to see how you're doing. Is there anything I can do to help? Right. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what the reticence is, just asking that question.
So what does this look like in terms of programming or offerings? When a business says, "Yeah, we want to take the next step and instill a culture and provide an offering to our client, to our employees," what does that look like? How does Pathwell approach it if someone calls you and says, "Hey, we want help"?
Mhm. Okay, so sort of two parts to your question I'll answer. In terms of mental health benefits, we are seeing some just, I think, lovely changes. So, companies are increasingly offering more and more benefits for therapy and counseling. So expanding their coverage because, the reality is like $500 is really not going to take you very far these days,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Counseling therapy is expensive. And you have now some companies like, Starbucks, yeah, Bell, Scotiabank, where they're starting with a minimum of $5,000 for coverage for mental health benefits
Yeah.
for everyone, right? I think that's just wonderful. That sends a message. We care about you. And if you need to go take care of yourselves, here you go, right? So we're seeing increasingly expanding benefits for mental health coverage. Um, Also expanding the coverage for sort of the type of support that people get. So, for example, not just counseling, but if you need to, speak to a dietitian, if your kid needs, an ADHD assessment, like we're seeing those benefits now being covered as well. So that's really lovely. Um, Within organization, so the second part of your question is what do I do when someone comes to PathWell, or specifically a leader comes to PathWell and says we need help? So I'll give you another sort of real life example. Working with a tech startup right now, and the CEO came to me, and I say we don't have a sort of cookbook approach, but the services that we provide are really bespoke to the leader and the organization that we're working with. So I started with him and just asking him, individually, he had some goals. So what does he want to work on? And what are his priorities for the business? We ended up then going at there, a leadership team of about 8 people. So we went in and we assessed everybody. We're now going to follow up with a full day workshop where we are going to share the results, not sort of individually, but as a whole. So what does this organization look like? What does this leadership look like as a team overall? What are the strengths? And what do we maybe need to work with or tweak on sort of individually on the coaching side so that they can all collectively meet the goals and the priorities of the organization over the next year. So the interventions are really bespoke, but we are finding more and more that organizations are coming to us and saying, how can you help us? Not just, on the sort of executive coaching side, because there are a lot of organizations that already do that work, but now asking us to also help them on the mental wellness side as well, which is, of course, amazing to see, and incorporating that type of work into their leadership development programs as well.
Yeah, amazing. And you kind of addressed or spoke to a child or a family member. I think that's really also important to call out, which is, the health of a loved one could be just as impactful, if not more, on the individual within your organization. And so extending sort of the ability to help them address those matters and even ailing parents.
Yeah.
That's been, I think, something where law firms and others have taken, steps forward to start to address, that type of support as well, extending coverage in that regard.
Yes.
Just maybe then taking those trends that you're speaking to and looking forward, what does that evolution of sort of workplace mental health look like, for the next 5 years or more?
I think increasingly, offering benefits to employees that really matter to them, getting rid of what I call like the ping pong perks, having a ping pong table at your organization, or having free snacks, we know doesn't actually move the needle in terms of mental well-being and the strength of your organization. There are other things that do. So investing in, for example, expanding mental health coverage. So that moves the needle, right? So fostering, again, working on fostering a culture of psychological safety. That's going to move the needle. Employees feeling that they have a leader who really cares about them. And if they have these, great perks that matter, that they're also walking the walk and not just talking the talk, right? That's really important. So a leader who is leading authentically, right? And is aligning their behaviors with what they say, that moves the needle, right? Because employees want to see that. It's not the free snacks, right? So continuing to invest in mental health programs and initiatives that actually matter to employees and that actually have an impact on well-being, and therefore have an impact on productivity and revenue.
What do you think of unlimited vacation?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, when we look at the data, Companies that have offered that, of course, the concern is always like, well, you're going to have employees who abuse that. And that's not what the findings have shown at all.
They're
At
scared to
all.
take it.
They're scared. We have the opposite problem. I just had this conversation with one of my client coordinators, might have been yesterday. And I was like, what's going on with your vacation? She's like, oh, I feel bad though. I feel bad leaving you. And she wants to go away for the holidays to see her father in Turkey. I was like, you need to go. You need to go. And I'm going to make sure you go. And we're going to be fine because she's very busy. And I know if she doesn't go, then she's going to be behind. She's going to be stressed. Like, that's not helpful to me, right? So yes, we do have this, I think, problem across many organizations in North America where people don't take their vacations, and leaders especially, right? And that's not good. That is not good. I heard this great quote. I forgot who it said it was, but a big, the CEO of Expedia, Zillow, anyhow, he was saying on Tim Ferriss's podcast, that it's like an employee who doesn't take their vacation is not promotable. I love that. I love that. And you think of it the same for, leaders. If a leader is not taking their vacation because they feel that they're indispensable, or that the organization is going to crumble if they leave for 2 weeks, well, then you have a problem, right? Then we have a problem here with your leadership if that's what you actually think, or right. So we need to take a look at that. So yes, so modeling what you're saying is important. Modeling good mental health, modeling good boundaries is so important for a leader to do. And I think we're seeing more and more of that, or requests, right, to help leaders do that, increasingly so. It's not about the ping pong and the free snacks.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. So you started to answer kind of one of my questions already, with your Tim Ferriss podcast. What else do you listen to? What's on your podcast playlist? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do love his podcast. I love like anything that blends psychology and business. Obviously, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, but I'm also a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur, and I love it. So anything that blends those two, I eat it up. What do I love listening to? There's Work Life by Adam Grant. He's great, has some interesting guests on his show. I like The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. I think he has really cool guests as well. You mentioned Andrew Huberman before. I just love it, and just love learning. But sometimes I just also have to shut that off, and use a different part of my brain. And sometimes I just need to not think. And I love funny podcasts. I love Conan O'Brien. So Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. Like, he's just hilarious. Or any of these, comedians that I find funny. A lot of them have podcasts or video podcasts as well. So I just put that in the background when I'm doing other stuff. And sometimes I just need to shut the sort of busy, business part of my brain and tap into another and just laugh. Laughter is therapy as well. It's wonderful medicine. So yeah, so it's a balance between sort of psychology, business, and then sometimes pure silliness.
Love that. Love that. Have you listened to Smartless?
Yes.
That's a good one too.
I do. I love those three guys, and the unscripted nature of it as well. Because like our conversation today, right? I was just having a conversation. I love sort of podcasts like that as well. They're real, and yeah, they're great.
Yeah. And maybe, just like a question here. I think this is probably a bad idea. But I found myself at times, not lately, but I went through a little bit of a phase where like I'd wake up at 2 or 3 or whatever it was, and getting back to bed, like the mind would just start going. And I'd put like an headphone in my ear, and just put on like Smartless, so it's like something I can just get back to sleep to. Bad idea?
Not great. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Not great, because that might be a bit too stimulating for you. So if you're having sleep difficulties,
Yeah.
And it's the middle of the night, and you're tossing and turning, what you should do is actually get out of bed. So we shouldn't be tossing and turning for more than 20 minutes in our bed. That's going to create a negative association between wakefulness and being in your bed. So you're supposed to just get out of bed and go somewhere else, if dim lighting, and do something that's very boring. So your Smart List podcast, if you find that funny, that's going to be probably too activating for you. And then you're going to be listening, you're going to be attending to, oh, what are they saying? Right. So then you're paying attention, and that is too activating when you should be doing something that is deactivating. So the recommendation is sort of get out of bed, do something boring, certainly stay away from screens. Okay, we should not, that dysregulates, again, melatonin production. It's going to trick the brain into thinking it's time to wake up, it's daytime, right? So something, but you can read something, but not on a screen. Read a book, read something boring. You can do sort of meditation is great, deep breathing. So anything that is de-stimulating to the brain, nothing that is too exciting or activating.
Okay, another answer that I don't like, and we're gonna edit out. Okay.
There's a theme.
Um, okay, Gina, I could go on forever, but I think for now, you've provided so much really helpful information. I think this kind of message for a business audience, we need to do more of it, and maybe have more people with their podcast list, including CFO Hive now, because it's a bit of business meeting psychology, but so much valuable information, and so really appreciate you doing this, and hope you'll do it again.
Oh, my pleasure. It was fun. Thank you for having me.